That new video released just a short time ago, an armed person that the FBI is asking for your help in identifying tonight.
It's heartbreaking to see now this footage really bring to life a story we've all been reading about. And again, we're just praying for the safety of Nancy Guthrie and that she will return home soon.
Everybody's talking about ransom. Everybody's talking about crypto. Everybody's sharing and staring at the masked man in the video, but almost nobody is talking about the one detail that matters most. Why risk the porch at all?
This is still something that was well planned out. That possibility that they could have planned for some type of long-term care.
TMZ is reporting even as early as today, has said that they have knowledge of who the person is. All they want is one Bitcoin.
Everyone that's had access to that house is a suspect. I don't care who it is. I don't care if somebody was doing door-to-door sales or whatever. Anyone that's had access to that house in the last year is a suspect.
By the time he was able to go ahead and disable the camera, get inside the house, get her, and get her out, it was less than 40 minutes.
Hill of Justice is sponsored and produced by Jermaine Delmas Studios.
Everybody's talking about ransom. Everybody's talking about crypto. Everybody's sharing and staring at the masked man in the video, but almost nobody is talking about the one detail that matters most. Why risk the porch at all? If this was a clean, organized abduction for whatever sake, why stand in front of a camera long enough to tamper with it? And that's not just an act of someone who is hiding. They're brazen and they don't care. That's the act of someone who believes that they can control the entire timeline. And that changes absolutely everything in this dynamic. Everybody's talking about this ransom, but we're going to go ahead and talk about what everybody else is missing on this. I'm Jerome Hill, former police officer, state investigator, and with me is retired Sheriff Victor Hill. Brother, we got some blowback last week about what some of our theories were about what happened to her. Those theories are starting to become macabre now, as we are entering the 12th day that Nancy Guthrie has disappeared. We know the facts of the case, and with somebody who has been under a tremendous amount of duress, it's safe to say that we are getting into territory where we're talking about unsurvivable. And it was something that I mentioned in the beginning of last week's video, but it's even more evident at this point in time that everybody on all sides are very, very stressed, and they're becoming very, very, very desperate is the best word that I can use. And you've got some thoughts on this.
Well, this is still something that was well planned out. And if it was well planned out, there's still that possibility. I'm not saying you're wrong, brother, but there's still that possibility that they could have planned for some type of long-term care. Because if this is really happening the way it's being seen to be, and if someone's really trying to get a ransom, they had to plan for this. They know it wasn't going to be, okay, I kidnap somebody one day and then tomorrow I get the money and I return them back. So if this is really what they're saying it is, and I'm not 100% sure that it is. Just like I can 100% tell you that she's deceased, I'm not 100% sure that this is what is being done, because this is a very, very odd kidnapping. There's just a lot of things here that makes me wonder if there's something more to it. But if it is the case, they would have had to been prepared to have some type of situation where they would have the time in order to receive a ransom. It's virtually impossible to transfer money without being detected. I mean,
Correct.
with technology today and everything, that's why the odds
Even
are I don't
Bitcoin.
exactly. I just think that this might be something else. But I don't want to completely outrule that possibility if it is the case.
Mhm.
But very, very odd. I've seen a lot of strange things, and one thing that they teach you as a detective, and one thing you've got to discipline yourself to do, is to keep all options open. That don't mean get
Sure.
foolish with conspiracy theories or whatever, but the one thing that I was taught in a class, and when I actually spent some years on the street, I was like, wow, they knew what they were talking about. They said the more crazy a story is, the more the chances are there might be some truth to it. Because usually when people lie, they try to lie with something that they think will be believable.
Mhm.
So they said if somebody tells you something real far fetched, just look into it, because there may be something to it. And I've had a lot of experiences like that with the jail, where we get some far out complaints, and it's like, nah, there's just no way one of my officers could have done something like that, and go and check, and sure enough, they were telling the truth, you know.
Mhm.
And that's why I just want to keep an open mind on this. I believe the odds are probably in your favor with your theory. I gotta admit that more than likely you're right about this, but it's not far fetched or impossible that if this is some real kidnapping and they're really trying to get paid, that they had some plan. If they planned it out to get past cameras and do all of this other stuff, they could have planned where she could be kept for a long period of time. I
Mhm.
mean, I guess the best way I could put it is possible, maybe not probable, but possible. And
Yeah.
sometimes things that aren't probable is possible
Yeah.
and happens. Does it make
Yeah.
sense?
It makes sense, but when I take a look at a problem, particularly, things that deal with criminality, we always use deductive and inductive reasoning. We know that once we took a look at the video in itself, that was late stage execution. We know that somebody reconned that because in the video, you're able to see the alleged suspect come at an angle. What a lot of people aren't talking about, there was a telephone pole that had a light on it. And he was able to go ahead and not face that to come onto the pole, come into the porch, excuse me. He is he has his back to it coming onto the porch. That is somebody who is executing this perfectly and coming at an angle with his head down. He has a flashlight in his mouth that once he applies pressure on it, the light comes on. He has a device where he has two lights over his shoulder, mask, and of course he have industrial gloves, so on and so forth, and he's tampering with the camera. The problem is that as they were trying to get this footage at the FBI, and of course, it comes days and days later, the crime scene has gone to shit. And this is how. Pima County Sheriff's Department released that scene way too early. And
I agree
everybody
with
has
that.
trampled on it, right? And so now you can, even if the FBI wanted to go ahead and do some really good sleuth work, they're compromised at this point in time. So we know that the mask is premeditation. We know the weapon because he had a weapon in his dip, in his pants area, right in the center. That's premeditation, resistance, the camera tampering. All this is the planning to what we're going to see here is with this reconnaissance. And the boldness of that reconnaissance on top of that. So there was a window of opportunity. Brother, by the time he was able to go ahead and disable the camera, get inside the house, get her, and get her out, it was less than 40 minutes. Now, when we look at the timeline also, we're taking a look at how we know this. Well, we know this when they disarmed the camera. We know this because of the fact that once her pacemaker is no longer syncing with the iPhone, excuse me, with the watch, with the Apple Watch. This was quick execution. Somebody knows.
Like
It's
I
known to
said
the
last
family.
time, this is an inside job. Somebody knows something. This is not random. He didn't go eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and you know what? I'm gonna go to this house and see who's in there and kidnap him. So we know that. That's what makes it very, very suspicious. Also, we got to look at the fact that maybe the ransom note is a way to throw people off.
The red
To
herring I talked about in the
exactly
last
right.
video.
Maybe the ransom note is being done to make people think she's still alive when she isn't, or throw them off that it's not somebody on the inside or whatever. All of those things remain on the table. You know, like I said, when you do an investigation, you got to keep everything open. I agree with you. The crime scene has been compromised, but they still got to go back because they may miss something because they always leave something.
Sure.
Sometimes you go back to a scene. I know I've done this as a detective, and I'll see something I didn't see before.
Mhm.
And it may not necessarily be some type of evidence that we need to turn into the evidence room. But if I go back to the scene and take a fresh look at it and then compare it with all of the statements that I've received, both written and oral, and put everything back together, either something will click or something will be like, wait a second, it's not matching up.
Right.
So I don't think you can visit a crime scene enough. You know, you want to get all the evidence you can the first time because of the chain of custody and everything. But going back and taking a second or third look, it can't hurt because it may not necessarily be evidence, but you may have missed something. Um, Sometimes what you think is something isn't. I once worked a murder one time where a man, he was dead and there were glasses next to him, and we assumed his glasses fell off, and it was his glasses. Well, guess what? The glasses was returned to his wife, and she came to the station to see us and said, "Listen, this is not my husband's glasses." So then that became our clue. Whoever glasses that was the person that killed him. They were in an altercation. So now we had the killer's glasses in our hands, and that's a whole nother story for a whole nother show.
Mm.
So I think it's important to go back to that scene because there could be something in that house that they think belongs there, and it doesn't. It could be something that was left by the suspect. So you can never visit a scene too much. So I want to make sure I add that element to it.
Right.
But again, this doesn't quite mesh with what we normally see in kidnappings. It doesn't.
Because
And but go ahead.
because we're talking about we're talking about two different things here. We're talking about stranger ransoms
Right.
and people who are usually that's known to the person, right? In stranger ransoms, we're looking at people who are rapid, aggressive in their communication. They're putting out clear communications about proof of life demands. This is not the case per se. And this is where it's kind of odd, where everybody is being, thrown for a loop, even the FBI.
Let me tell you what we don't know yet. And maybe we do, and maybe there's something out there that I've missed, I haven't seen because I've been busy. But let me tell you what we don't know yet. So when we work a murder, and I don't want to say it's a murder yet, even though it's a probability it is. We do what's called a psychological autopsy, or some people call it a circumstantial autopsy, meaning
Mhm.
victimology. Who is a victim? Okay, what do they do for a living? And on street crimes, it's pretty clear and clear cut because if we got a dead body and it's a prostitute, okay, we know we got to start looking for Johns, and we know we got to look for a pimp. At least we got to start there. If it's a drug dealer, we got to start looking for who was the competition or whatever. But the victimology is very important. And it's more so victimology. Let me take that back, because a psychological autopsy usually isn't a suicide, because we're trying to figure out what is going on with that person, that we could find a proof that it's a suicide to match the physical evidence. So let's call it what it is. And my correction, victimology. So I haven't heard a lot about victimology at this particular point, to know was there any long standing internal conflicts. Was when you think of someone in their 80s, you're thinking of a grandmother anyway, so you don't think they're involved in drug trade or anything like that. And I'm not saying she is. I'm just throwing it out there. But you got to do your victimology in order to come up with a motive. And if you know who this person was and what they were involved in, okay, let's say it's a judge. Well, let's say the judge just made a ruling on a case to someone who's involved in organized crime, or a ruling on a case where someone is very, very mad and known to be violent. Let's say hypothetically a judge gets killed by a sniper. And then it turns out we look at all of the cases that judge ruled on, and someone that she ruled not in favor has a long history in the military of being a sniper. Boom, we got a suspect. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be victimology done. And I really haven't heard any real victimology. And there's probably a reason for that. I'm not saying that the FBI or the investigators are supposed to release to the public the victimology. But now that the FBI is involved,
Mm-hmm.
and especially now that they're under new leadership, I know they know what they're doing. And
Not quite.
someone's doing the victimology.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's got to be doing the victimology. Any conflicts, like was there any internal conflicts between her and her kids? Uh, was she involved in a relationship with someone who's now mad or something like that? And I know we don't think of things like that when people get to that particular age, which you never know.
Mm-hmm.
But if I knew more about the victimology, I could make a better assessment to what your theory is, or to any theory at that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But here we got somebody who's immobile. Okay. And this is the investigative gap that we got to talk about. We
Right.
know that she's immobile, right? So we have to know that you talked about victimology. I'd even put that just aside a little bit, is how in the hell was she going to get out of there anyway? We know that then she would have to be mobile somehow, some way. And so would have been the suspect or suspects. So now we got to go ahead, because that is really the big coup de grace right now. The vehicle or vehicles are central to this case. We know that without a doubt, because there's no way she's not there.
Right. But in order to figure out whose vehicle to search, we got to have a suspect. So once we get the suspect, then we can get consent or a search warrant to search the vehicle to see if there's trace evidence for her. And that's my point. If I know the victimology, then I can figure it out. Is we got to look for the modus operandi, which is the fancy word for motive.
Mhm.
And there's three motives usually in everything: PMS, power, money, and sex. So if we know which one it is, then we can get a pool of suspects. If we get a pool of suspects, then we know, well, what vehicles are registered to them and what we can look at. And again, there's some things, and I haven't had a chance to really study this yet. You may know this, but is she wealthy? And if so, how wealthy is she? Because there is money. There has to be a motive there. And then, of course, if you look at the motive of power, it's not necessarily power like trying to attain an office where you try to assassinate somebody, but power could be as far as revenge. Something happened, and maybe not
Sure.
necessarily something she did, but something someone close to her did, and they're making that particular person suffer. So the victimology is the key to this thing. When you got a whodunit murder, and again, I don't want to call this a murder yet, even though there's a probability it is. One of the ways to solve a whodunit murder to get started is the victimology.
Let's
Who is
go.
the victim?
Let's go with
And what
victimology.
enemies would they have?
Right.
Right.
Let's go with victimology. In the
Okay.
meantime, what you could be doing is route analysis, about what's going on. Where's the cars, egress, ingress. You could do a camera grid to go ahead and take a look at what that is on
Cell
that end.
phones,
You
cell
could
phone
do
grids,
right,
which phones were pinging, right?
pull traffic cameras, and see what that is. Perimeters of where gas stations are, because we do that too. You know, who would go ahead and purchase gas if they did A, B, C, and D, all
I, I,
within 30 or 60 minutes of the event.
I agree, but let's say that's 1,000 people that 1,000 cars or whatever. The victimology tells you which one to zoom in on.
No, I get that.
Right,
That's if we are going to go ahead and be surgical about that. But in the meantime, there's other things, and I do want to say this: there's 1,000 people on this case anyway, so I'm sure
right,
all this stuff is going on.
right,
Other people have, and I
right,
want to be fair on that end.
right. What's the height and weight um, of this suspect
They
that they
didn't put it
saw?
out there yet, but they know
They
it.
put it out, and they
Yeah, but
have
they
they
know
put
it.
the image out.
Oh yeah, they put the image out.
They put
Yeah,
the image out. Okay,
yeah. Once you
okay,
get the image, you already know it. Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So that's
And
definitely.
what else can you tell from this image? I haven't seen it yet. Can you tell race?
No, you can't. I mean, you could tell that the person is either light skinned or white. Definitely not a dark skinned individual or black
Right.
in that sense. But you could
Let me
tell.
interrupt on that. With victimology, I can tell you this: 9 times out of 10, there's a 90% chance whoever the victim is, the race is the same.
Mhm.
Most
Right,
of those
right.
type of
That's
crimes
true.
are done intraracially. A
Right.
lot of people talk about black on black crime, but really there's Asian on Asian crime, there's white on white crime, there's people tend to rape, rob, and murder within their own race.
Correct, correct. I mean, that is the
Right.
FBI statistics, and it holds true. It doesn't matter the decade.
Right.
It holds true on that. So, we have all those things in front of us. I mean, he was super careful. I mean, this person knows the house. Of course, I believe that the family knows who this person is if they were able to get a good look at them, so on and so forth. Somebody, whether we talked about this, the plumber, whoever, the gardener, whatever it is, that is. And I don't rule this out. People in our church, and here they
Right.
are on CBS interviewing people on their church, saying, basically as if just everybody else is a suspect, and not the people at church.
Yeah, everybody is a
Right.
suspect until you start eliminating them. But when this is said and done, and the world knows who this is, it's going to be someone that she knows and her family knows, or it's going to be a friend or family member that did it
Mhm.
or arranged it. The probabilities of that, it's a very low probability that this is just some stranger. Let me
Mhm.
ask you this: she doesn't have any money. You said that, right?
Right, right. I mean,
I
the
mean,
only
she's not.
money. I
She
mean, she's 84 years old. It
right,
wasn't as if um, her position in life was to go ahead, and she was a single mother, basically.
right. We're not saying she's broke, but she's not extremely wealthy.
Right,
Where okay, right. But
right.
what about her family members? What about the anchor lady? Are they
The
wealthy?
the anchor is not wealthy, but she's well off, and I would say, for the sake of this purpose, rich compared to
To the
middle
average
Americans.
person?
Right, right,
Okay.
right.
Let me tell you another thing, another angle we'd have to look at as well too. Let's say hypothetically that the family is completely innocent or whatever. You
Mhm.
also got to look at what type of enemies her daughter may have made. She's high profile.
Mhm.
So if this is a revenge thing, I'm not really that familiar with her. I don't
Mhm.
know what subject matters that she speaks on or whatever, but if she's someone that people got fixated on and happen to know her mother, it could be a revenge thing. Again, you got to look at all possibilities as well, because if it's not a thing where we know these people have a lot of money and we want this particular lot of money, then we're dealing with some type of revenge motive.
Yeah.
Again, usually the motives is power, money, or sex. It's not likely sex is a motive in this. So it either has to be power or money. And when you deal with power, power deals with revenge.
Yeah, I mean, to lend a little bit of hand to your thought process there. when taking a look at the video, we're talking about somebody who was comfortable with the approach to the camera, did not panic at all. I mean, we're not talking about he was jittery. This guy was not that, so they basically acted in sequence: mask, approach, then he tampered with the stuff, then he departed as if this was nothing.
One thing I would be doing is I would be taking that video and asking family members and friends, who do you know fits this height, weight? Look at the gait of the walk. Is there anyone you know that knows her, that knows her family, that fits the description of this? Now, of course, if he's someone that was hired to do it, but you don't want to eliminate that. You want to make sure that's done. Because like you said, there was someone that's very, very familiar. So he's either given information, hey, this is what you'll find here. This is what you need to do here. And he actually staked it out or something. But like you say, he's someone that probably had access or knows everything there. Because let me tell you something, even if you just give somebody information, it's still going to be hard. If you tell me, hey, go to my whoever's house and the alarm is over here and this is this and this is that, and I've never been there before, that's still going to be very, very difficult to remember where the alarm is here, the camera is here, make sure you do this and do that. So again, and it may not, you said something interesting. Someone that is there and been there, not necessarily because they're friends or family, but like you said, maybe someone that does some maintenance work there. I mean, the lawn care, like you said, the plumber or whatever.
Right.
That's something to look at. But I would be, even though you can't clearly identify the person, there's sometimes identifiers, like some people have a particular gait, how they walk, that they're subconsciously going to do no matter what.
Yeah.
And
They're leaving
that's right. Go ahead.
They're leaving all types of digital breadcrumbs.
Exactly.
Bar none. And TMZ is reporting even as early as today, as late as today, I should say, that they had gotten an email, they since forwarded over to the FBI, where an individual has said that they have knowledge of who the person is. All they want is 1 Bitcoin. And if anybody's familiar with that, that's probably anywhere between 53,000 to about 68,000, depending on the fluctuation of the market, which is more than the $50,000 that the FBI has put out there for information leading to the arrest and option.
And you got to follow every lead. Let me tell
Absolutely.
you, that could be legit. It could be a nutcase. It could be somebody just trying to get some stuff started, because all of those folks come out. I mean, we've seen it. You get a serial killer and somebody comes in and confess, I'm the serial killer, and they haven't even killed a roach yet. And you see all of this when it's high profile. Everybody comes out, all the lunatics, everybody. And some people come out. I mean, everybody comes out. And, whether you believe them or not, the psychics come out. Everybody's going to come out on stuff like this. And you've got to follow every lead. You can't go based on what you believe. You can't say, well, I don't believe in
Good
psychics.
point.
You got to listen to everybody, interview everybody, because you don't want to take that chance. The psychic could be right. And so you got to follow every lead, whether you believe it or not or whatever, because that's how investigations get botched real quick. When decisions are made, we're not going to listen to this or do that. And you never can tell. This could be legit.
Right. On the reverse side,
Right.
confidence becomes vulnerability. When this suspect feels that they're smarter than the police, they're smarter than the FBI, this is where mistakes happen. And we count on that all the time. People were like, I've snuck past this, or I didn't tell nobody this, or I this and that. No. More times than not, we're probably on to you and you have no clue how that's going to be and how we're trying to set you
and
up.
let me say this. I was watching a documentary on Jack the Ripper, the latest one. There's one that happened back in the 1800s, and there was some other guy sending tape recorders saying he was Jack the Ripper. But for a long time, they had a suspect, and the people in charge of the investigation didn't take it seriously. There were people at this guy's job teasing him, saying, people saying you're Jack the Ripper. Guess what? It was him. But somebody in the investigative process was like, I don't think it's him, and didn't really press the issue. But they actually had a suspect. 9 times out of 10, they've got a pool of suspects and already, and somewhere in there's a person right there. They're probably just narrowing it down. But it's
agree with that.
it can only be so many people. Everyone that's had access to that house is a suspect. I don't care who it is. I don't care if somebody was doing door-to-door sales or whatever. Anyone that's had access to that house in the last year is a suspect.
Yeah, I'm with that too, and there is no better way to talk about that. We just know that this is an organized and controlled offender. And at this point in time, his overconfidence, as we suggested over and over again, is going to be his Achilles heel. That's no doubt about that. But we have other things that nobody's really talking about, and that everybody's looking at, and we talked about it earlier in the show about the red herring with the ransom note, and everybody's so focused on that. And more to your point, it's probably really not germane. It has a little bit to it. We've already had imposters. They've gotten over 18,000 tips so far.
Yeah, and that's what makes it difficult. And like I said, you got folks that legitimately may have seen something, folks that think they saw something, folks that just want to create confusion. And you see it. Let me tell you, I worked a murder one time, and we got a tip. Hey, I know who killed this guy. He was bragging about killing the guy, and he told 3 of us he killed the person. So he went and we picked this guy up. And it turns out he was telling people he was a killer. But guess what? He wasn't. And he ended up confessing as I was just trying to scare some people.
Right.
So that took away from the investigation. You got folks out there like that. Yeah, I'm the one that killed that guy or whatever. And that happens. That's happened on investigations I've been involved in. So you got 18,000 tips, and they've got to follow every last one of them, whether they think it's crazy or not. And even the ones they think is crazy that might be crazy have to be eliminated, so that when you do have the suspect, it's more proof that you got the right guy. You're just not picking somebody out of the sky so that you can say you did something.
Could you see a scenario where the porch in itself was a stage? Because people love acting. They love being the center of attention. And knowing that this camera's there and they could go ahead and mess with other people psychologically, is there an element to be explored there?
It's always an element to be. No stone can be left unturned. Everything, when you open an investigation like this, everything is possible, and you got to eliminate each possibility as you go. Okay, we've eliminated A, we've eliminated B, and you got to do it until you finally make it to Z.
Okay. Now, we are also talking about how this was such a mishap in terms of the Pima County Sheriff's Office releasing the crime scene. We always do after action reports on what we could have done better in these particular situations. How could this have gotten so jacked up, so bad?
Again, bureaucracy. You could have certain people in different positions that are incompetent, impatient. Unfortunately, it happens all of the time. And if there isn't a strong leader to enforce it, some people release crime scenes because they're tired and they want to go home. It's just ridiculous. And if there's not a strong leader that's going to make something happen, no, we're not doing this, or this was going to happen, then you get this type of results.
Yeah, because we're talking about humans, and you're talking about a bunch of individuals who are basically running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to find this. They get fatigued too.
They get fatigued, but somebody has to do that. Let me tell you, I can't tell you until I took over and became in charge how many situations we had, and then the supervisor was like, okay, we'll start Monday. And that's crazy. So when I took over and I became the sheriff, I put a stop to that. We get a murder, there's a manhunt. What did y'all do? We did this, we did this. Okay, what are you going to do next? Well, Monday. What do you mean Monday?
Right.
You
Right.
going to give a killer the weekend off? Oh, I guess we coming to work. Yeah, I guess so.
Right.
Because if that was your sister, your brother killed, you wouldn't want everyone sitting home for the weekend, and this guy gets a 2-day head start. So stay on it until we get him. And if there's not that type of iron fist leadership from the top, you see things get loosey goosey.
Right. To give the pushback to some of the other people out there that said that some of my comments were controversial last week in terms of saying that Nancy is no longer with us. I want you to pretend and be Savannah, and I want you to be her brother, and I want you to be her sister. You saw in the video them holding hands, and they looked disheveled. They were mentally anguished, and so on and so forth. Now, they have the benefit of air conditioner, eating well, a roof over their heads, knowing that they are safe or they can become safe. You're talking about, on the other hand, a woman that's 84 years old, has a pacemaker, is scared as hell, which is exasperating that pacemaker, doesn't have, well, we don't think, the ability to be safe. That
That
wears
could
on
be
anybody at
that could be,
84.
but I got to disagree with you on this one. Number one, until we're absolutely sure, we have to keep hope alive, no pun intended, with the civil rights worker. And but and another thing too that you got to keep in mind, you got to in law enforcement, we got to be very, very careful about death notification. And professional agencies do not do death notifications by phone or whatever like that. They always send someone in person because they don't know how they will react. So, it's a very difficult situation to even though you and I know there's a high probability that may be the case, it's kind of like EMS. They have to keep working on the person even though they're
Sure.
obviously dead.
We're
Right,
told to do
because
that, right?
their loved one, exactly, because their loved ones are, well, we stopped, there's no hope or whatever like that. You got to render aid.
Mhm.
And we've got to continue to render aid until we absolutely know that she's deceased.
Right.
So,
And and I certainly agree with that.
that exactly. So I think that's what they're saying,
Right,
brother.
right.
You
Yeah.
know,
And even if they are saying that, the thoughts that I have and why I've said that was under pristine conditions. You're thinking, okay, guess what? You know, she could make it. She's not under pristine conditions.
well, we
Have
don't
no
know that.
illusions.
Remember, like I said, if this thing was well planned out
Hmm.
and they planned the pacemaker and everything like that, they may have planned to have her somewhere where they could sustain her until they get the ransom money. So, again,
But that's the problem.
we're assuming she doesn't have presence. And
But
remember, in
that
investigations, you never assume.
I get that, and I'm with you on that. And yes, if this was my investigation, I wouldn't be saying this. But what I'm
Right.
saying is
But
that,
but you still should be saying it because you're a professional investigator.
well, for sure. But the fact of the matter still remains, there is a practicality and a reality to this.
R-
And you're saying, what you're saying is not wrong. But what I'm saying at the same time is this, that we have a set of conditions. She was leaking. It wasn't one drop. It wasn't two drops. It wasn't three drops. It wasn't 10 drops. And it wasn't 20 drops. She was leaking coming out of that
Okay,
place.
I thought it was 90-degree blood stains. If it's 90-degree blood stains, that's dripping,
Yeah, it
pooling and
was dripping
dripping.
all over
Right,
the
but
place.
that's different. That's different than pooling.
Well,
Pooling
that's
shows a
true. It's not
large a
pulling.
large loss of blood. If it's dripping, that means that it could possibly a bandage or something can happen. So, I mean, I need to see that blood. If I see a large amount of blood, that's one thing. But me seeing drips of blood doesn't tell me a person necessarily dead. It tells me they got injured on their way out.
It could be. She could have got injured on the
Right.
way out. But still, the level of care is what I'm talking about. You're saying that she already has a hospital set up somewhere under a rock
Well, I
somewhere
mean,
in
if they did this
Tucson.
type of planning, maybe they did, maybe they do. I mean, this was a lot of planning. This has got to be the most well planned thing I've seen in a long time. I mean, they really got in and got out, and nobody knows who they are. At least we don't. We don't know if they do. They haven't told us yet.
See,
So if they
my
did,
push,
if they did that level of planning, they probably planned where they were going to take her.
my
I don't think
pushback
that they
is,
purposely hurt her on the way out. I think while they were trying to get her, something happened. She, like when we're making an arrest, we're not trying to hurt people, but sometimes they fall, we fall, they
sure,
hit something, they start bleeding.
yeah, but you take that same situation and you put it in the city, this person would already been caught. It was location. It was the crime of opportunity of the location that saved this suspect from that being caught right now. That's it.
How's that a crime of opportunity? That's a crime of planning. Opportunity is when you just, yeah, opportunity and planning is different. It's kind of like the difference between an organized serial killer and a disorganized serial killer. You know the difference from the crime scene. Disorganized is all over the place. Organized, you see the planning and everything.
The
And this
plan.
person was organized and he planned it.
Then if you're saying that, then it was not only planned in that sense. Then guess what? They knew that that person was going to be there at that day,
Right. And if they
right?
want money, they know they got to keep her
But
alive.
they're not actively trying to do that though. They have already given 2 death notices to the family saying if you don't do it in this time, she's dead. They gave another one saying if you don't do it by this time, she's dead.
Okay, well, it must be not true the first time if they said it a second
That's what
time.
I'm saying.
Right. So
And it may not be
so
the
that
same people.
exactly, we don't know. But like I said, we got to keep all the options
Mhm.
open. There's a high probability, brother, that what you're saying is true. But until that's confirmed, we don't want to do a death notification yet. Out of professionalism and concern for the family, until it's confirmed death, just like we don't tell people they're dead until the coroner pronounces them dead.
Right.
That's what we want to do in this situation.
Right. No, I can get down with that.
All right.
But that's what we got for today's show. Many of you are watching today's show and you are definitely subscribing and certainly liking. But hit that notification bell. And that's important because anytime we come out with content like this, we'd like you to be notified and to go ahead and see our what we have next. Brother, lively discussion. I
Yes.
appreciate it as always. And without further ado, we'll see you.